We're going to have one of the best coaching staffs assembled, some of the best scouts, some of the best kids that we're recruiting. The commitments already coming on the way as I speak.
So that is new University of Colorado head football coach Deion Sanders promising fans and his new players that he is going to bring the winning culture he established at Jackson State and HBCU in Mississippi to his new team.
How about that? Yeah, how about that? All right, you go do this, guys. Good luck.
So Sanders is now being criticized as a so-called sellout for leaving Jackson after many envisioned him altering the landscape of sports at historically black colleges and universities. He did land top recruits. He went 27-5 in 3 seasons and just won the school's second Southwestern Athletic Conference title in 2 years. Sanders will now try to replicate that success in a more competitive league with a Colorado team that just went 1-11. So joining us now, the perfect person to talk about that, Bomani Jones, a third-generation HBCU graduate who went to Clark Atlanta University. He's also the host of Game Theory with Bomani Jones, which will kick off its second season on HBO and HBO Max in January. Wow, that is a giant lead-in to you. You have lots of accomplishments. Thank you this morning. So, you know, this is... I kind of feel like we're talking about family business, like in front of everybody. You know what I'm talking about? Because there's a long tradition in the African American community about HBCUs and whether you go, whether you're not, and this. Why can't Deion Sanders just choose to be with who he wants to be?
Oh, he can go take whatever job he wants, but when you come into the first job and sell the idea that you are going to be the savior of HBCUs and you are going to raise the playing field, not just for Jackson State, but for everybody else, and you're going to do it because God told you to do it.
He said that.
Yeah, he said that. He explicitly said that God sent him to do this. So then when you leave, yeah, people are going to ask questions about what exactly it was. Now, I don't go into the sellout place necessarily, but I do think, he's the monorail salesman from The Simpsons. He went in, he sold the big dream. Now, if you paid any attention, you knew the dream he was selling wasn't possible. It was not an achievable one that he had, but he sold it and he got people to believe it, and then he chucked the deuce and left.
So you know Shannon Sharp, right?
Yes.
So and you've heard his comments.
Yes.
I'm sure. I want to play them for our audience because Shannon Sharp has a sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. If he did it for Jackson State, then maybe that helped the entire HBCU. Let's play this, and I want your response to it.
Deion did something that very few coaches are able to do. He leveraged his relationships. Skip, no football team had more uniforms than Jackson State except the University of Oregon. Under Armour, every single week, they got new helmets. They got new unis. He did this with Walmart. He took $150,000 of his salary and helped finish building the facilities.
He did?
He leveraged his relationship with American Airlines. He brought eyes to HBCUs, Skip. There wasn't nobody talking about HBCUs, especially now. They're talking about, they're on television. That's because of him. He gave you a blueprint. Now follow the blueprint.
He's saying basically mission accomplished. What do you think?
Well, part of it, and I love Shannon to death, part of where I disagree with him is so much of that was singular to Deion Sanders. Like, we do have to admit that he is the charismatic individual. Like, just because Deion could do it doesn't mean that everybody else can do it. That's the first part. The second thing, they're going to play in the Celebration Bowl, I believe, next week in Atlanta against the champions of the MEAC. They played in that bowl game last year. South Carolina State blew their doors off in that game. Do you know the head coach at South Carolina State? Can you name a single player at South Carolina State? I can't. It brought attention to Deion. It brought attention to Jackson State. You weren't going to bring attention to all these other schools in the time period that he was there. Like, if he was really going to accomplish that, that's a 10-year program, at least.
You're saying he had to stay.
Yeah.
And so 60 Minutes profiled him just like a month or two ago. And it was on that program. He said, I believe that God called me collect and I had to accept the charges. And then he said this. Let's play it.
A lot of folks sit back with Twitter fingers and talk about what they're going to do. And I wanted to go do it.
Do what?
Change lives, change the perspective of HBCU football, make everyone step up to the plate and do what's right by these kids.
Didn't he do that at least by starting it? And now, as Shannon was saying, is it up to others to carry it forward?
If he can go find another Deion Sanders, Right? Like, that's the thing of this, is that if you're talking about establishing something long term, right? Something that is sustainable, the idea he got it started, now you go do it.
Yeah.
But aren't you making his blueprint argument? Because there are others who are in the NFL or former NFL players who are charismatic,
who could do it,
and who could step into
Deion
other
Sanders
HBCUs.
has spent the last 35 years telling us there ain't but one Deion Sanders. And now he's telling us go find somebody else to do what Deion Sanders does. You can't have this both ways. I don't judge him for taking the job at Colorado. They probably increased his salary by something like 15 times, right? I totally get that. It all makes sense. But what he did was something that college coaches do all the time, which is you have to sell people 4-year, 10-year plans when your plan is always 1 year at a time. That's the only way that you could really pull that off. And so he came in and he sold a long-term vision for what was going on at Jackson State, but his goals and ambitions were always to be a Power 5 head coach. My take has always been he went to Jackson State primarily because he wanted to be a head coach, but didn't want to ever be anybody's assistant coach. So we had to find somebody that would give him a job and make him a head coach, and so he could have that on his resume, and then he could take that to try to get the job that he actually wanted. Jackson State was the place that could do it, and he did a lot of good work while he was at Jackson State. But all the bigger, grandiose notions of what he was doing for somebody else, no, it was what it always is. He did it for Deion, and that's fine if you don't tell us that you're trying to do this for somebody else.
But can he do both? Can't he go to a program and be there for 3 years, only have 5 losses like he did, and bring the attention? Maybe the next person won't be, prime time. They won't be as charismatic as he is. But he still did bring attention to it. And what I've seen from the athletic director and other people is they were grateful for him. And they talked about him going on, and something he signaled because of the financial disparities here.
No, he's very good, but I think the magnitude of the financial disparity is so much greater than anybody realizes. I think the magnitude of the financial disparity between HBCUs and other FCS schools, the smaller division in Division I, is bigger than people realize it is. So there's room to criticize him for the way that he has left and for the fact that his initial rhetoric is not in line with his ultimate.
Bomani, then what would you have him do? What would you have the man do?
Oh, well, I wouldn't have come in the first place and said that God sent me here to fix HBCUs, and God decided that in the middle of it you were supposed to leave? Right? I mean, like, the thing I've said is maybe God wants 10% of $5 million and not 10% of $375. If God can do math, I can understand why it is. He sold a dream and then walked out on the dream. People have the right to be critical of that. I also would have taken the job that he took at Colorado, right? It's not a judgment of the fact that he took the job, but this is not in line with what he told us for all these years.
But the reason I'm glad we're having this conversation is because it does highlight those massive financial disparities. And so I guess the question is not just do you have to hire a charismatic coach who brings attention to your program to fix it? What's the other way to fix it?
The problem that we have here is if you watched, especially during the pandemic when everybody had all their crypto money and you had all these different schools that were like, yo, we now have more billionaires donating to our schools, plural, billionaires, because that's what makes this work really is those donations and big television deals. That's where the money comes from. We got 8 black billionaires in the United States, and you can name 6 of them, right? Like, you may not know it off the top of your head, but they're all people that you know. The initial capital that is necessary, that's the hard part. At a school like Jackson State, in a city that's been choked off by the state of Mississippi for as long as anybody can remember and underfunded for as long as anybody can remember, the money they need and the things that need to be done, football is not the place where we're going to start with this in the first place. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves, does it matter whether or not the football team is great? Does it matter? Because everything that people were doing and giving money to serve these players that they now thought could go to the NFL could be done for all the players that they have anywhere, even if they're not as good at football as the ones that Deion Sanders.
This is so weird for me because we used to talk about this sitting around the table as a kid. I lived blocks from Southern University, and everybody Southern Grambling, my family. So this is so weird to be having this conversation
at this table
about HBCUs and the athletic program.
We love having you. Come back soon. Thank you, Bomani.
Come back every week
very much.
as often as possible.
And everyone should watch Bomani's show, Game Theory with Bomani Jones, kicks off a second season on HBO and HBO Max in January.